Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay, I heard it too. I was just making sure. These computers, man, I'm concerned more and more the longer that we go, Charles, that Terminator probably is really how the
Yeah. Is it art imitating life or life imitating art at this point? We are becoming
world's.
our
I don't
movies.
know, man. We are. It's just every time somebody says something about AI, or I listen to one of these really smart people and they're talking, I'm like, did you guys not watch Terminator? Like that's exactly how this started, man. Is
Right.
giving computers way too much power.
Yeah.
Um,
Or Walmart.
so
Walmart. It knows what you want. It knows what you're looking at. When you get home and see in your Facebook feed that, oh, you need some Dove soap.
I I don't want to get like too deep into conspiracy theories because that conversation
No.
could Napoleon the whole recording. But I will say you it is impossible to convince me at this point that my smartphone does not spy on conversations that I have.
Yeah.
It just does. Like this was maybe a month or so ago now, but our son decided for the first time that he wanted to play baseball, right? I've never played baseball in my life. Well, maybe like when I was 6, right? In 35 years, I've never touched a baseball with the intent of playing the sport. I don't watch baseball. Like I'll go to an Ocean baseball game periodically, but it's not like I'm always watching and talking about baseball. He decides, hey, I think I want to, play baseball. And I'm like, yeah, man, we can go to academy and get a couple of gloves and start playing catch. And then 2 hours later, I get on my phone. And what's the first ad on Facebook? Baseball stuff. And I'm like, I've never bought anything baseball related online in my life. I'm telling you, man, it's the
Oh,
Matrix.
it is the Matrix. That's right. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist either. But yeah, there's definitely evidence out there that we're being watched.
Yeah. Just so that the
Okay.
families that are watching our recording know that we all struggle at times. I went way too deep on YouTube once with some flat earth stuff. And for a couple hours, I was really contemplating the reality of the round earth. I was like, I need to stop watching this. So if you're out there and you're struggling, it happens to all of us. But that's why we need conversations like this to reground
Absolutely.
us in some reality and some truth and some change. So, hey, for people that are tuning in to watch us, typically we go live the first and third Monday of every month with different guests on our Parents Helping Parents website. The first Monday of this month is the 4th of July, which is actually Monday. This is Friday because it's a recording. And so rather than trying to find a speaker, it really is just too much to ask people to give up family time and holiday time. I think even for good causes, we want to set healthy boundaries related to that and say like, hey, on the 4th of July, you should be popping fireworks and trying to blow fingers off and stuff like that with your family and your loved ones. And so we wanted just to pre-record a Parents Helping Parents session, which is what me and Charles are going to do this morning for a little bit. We'll upload it at the normal time. If you, and maybe I should have thought this through a little bit, everything I needed to say, because now things are just coming to me. We usually like a lot of interaction as we're discussing this stuff. Me and Charles are just going to talk about some things. We're going to have a little bit of conversation, but if you have questions about those things, shoot a comment on the video. I'll come back in a couple days later, a week later, and try to answer comments. Maybe even Charles will come onto the video and see if he's got some answers to any comments that come in. And then if you've got questions that maybe you don't want to post things publicly on Facebook on a comment thread, because remember, that's on there. Like it doesn't get deleted. This video will outlast all of us on the internet. And so sometimes we get nervous about those comments. If you're concerned about your anonymity, if you want more privacy, you can send us a private Facebook message and say, hey, I had a question about the video. One of us will read that and get that to me and get that to Charles, and we will message you back and get in touch. So I'm sure that, not I'm sure, I will, after I upload the video, I'll go back in and I will, in the comments section, tag Charles's coaching company with a website and a Facebook page, so that if you want to reach out to Charles directly, you'll have some of that contact information available to you on there. So if you're not familiar with Parents Helping Parents, we're a Oklahoma-based nonprofit organization founded by parents, for the most part run by parents, with the goal of providing resources, education, and support to parents who have a child any age struggling with a substance use disorder. So you might have a 15-year-old struggling with substance use disorder. You might have a 55-year-old child struggling with substance use disorder. We want to provide support for both of those families, both of those parents. We want to help provide some education. We want to help connect people with resources in their area. So for more information about who we are, what we do, the different things that we've got going on potentially in a city near you, and here on the World Wide Web, you can check us out at Facebook at Parents Helping Parents Inc. is the Facebook tag, or you can check us out on the web, www.parentshelpingparents.info is the website there. So Charles, man, everybody missed like the funnest part of our conversation about nicknames before we hit record, but that's okay. This will still be good. Hey, thanks for taking some time, carving out some time on a Friday morning. I know you're busy and you've got a lot of different stuff going on heading into a holiday weekend. So thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely, Dick, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Always glad to support and collaborate with Parents Helping Parents.
Yeah, for people in the community maybe who don't know Charles, never met Charles, or don't know what Charles does or what he's about, a couple of things, man. He is just a value member of the recovery community here in the Oklahoma City metro area. Provides some recovery support, some professional coaching, does some trainings for some people, and is involved with one of the local universities, helping coach and teach students, right? Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah. Just briefly on that, with Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City branch, there's a program called the Center for Social Innovation, and they're online. So reach out to me for resources there. But basically, I'm providing purpose and success coaching for those participants in that program.
Yeah, that's great. In addition to that, if anybody in Oklahoma City is just interested in really catching the smoke on a ping pong table, Charles has got mad ping pong game at the office that a lot of us kind of share and utilize. There's a ping pong table. He is the undisputed heavyweight champion of that table. Man, what did you beat me, like 21-5 the last time we played? It was ridiculous.
I don't remember the numbers, man. I just remember the game.
I do, because I felt a lot of shame. I appreciate the kindness. This is how you know what kind of guy Charles is. He's like, man, it was just a fun game. And I'm like, no, man, you just brutalized me and sent me home like a whipped dog.
Okay, well,
yeah. I mean, I didn't lose any sleep over it.
Okay,
I'm going to train hard. I'm going to train harder.
That's what it's all about.
That's
what it's all about. Level up.
Yeah, that's what I'll spend my YouTube video time watching, is ping pong training videos. So
yeah.
Hey, Charles, when we saw each other, I guess it was on Tuesdays that we typically see each other. And it might have even been a week ago Tuesday. What kind of initiated our idea about this conversation we were going to have today is just a really great family vacation that you had just come back from, kind of RV tooling around the world. And you had given me some feedback that was just a really good, refreshing time for you. I mean, outside of you guys all catching COVID, glad everybody's feeling better. But, even in spite of that it was just a really good time of like rest and renewal, and to be outdoors and to be with the family. And so it really just kind of got me thinking about the importance of that on a fundamental level for everyone, but especially for families who are potentially struggling with some substance use disorders in those. So I kind of lined up a series of questions that I thought maybe I could pick your brain about and we could go through.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. I even have my handy dandy little yellow legal pad notes.
Look at that. Yeah, great minds.
Look at that, man. There's something about reading on yellow paper that is just easy on the eyes.
It just is. The contrast is there. There's no pressure. Yeah. There's no pressure with yellow.
Yeah, I agree. Right. So question one, Charles, that I'm curious about is, when we think about families who are engaged in active addiction? And maybe this is a long question for families maybe who don't quite understand that. I would say if one member of your family is engaged in active addiction, then the family is engaged in active addiction, right? Because we all believe that
Yeah.
the addiction is a family disease. It impacts the whole family, regardless of who the identified substance abuser is. So when a family's engaged in active addiction, how does that disrupt a family's like overall health and wellness from your perspective?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So I should tell our audience, those who may not know me, that I am a person in long-term recovery from alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. I did have some substance abuse issues as well, but it was really alcohol that was my primary drug of choice. And this is 16 years into recovery. So it looks different on the other side. But what I can tell you from my own experience and those that I serve in my training is that in terms of health and wellness, I think was the question, it is very disruptive. When one person is engaged in substance use or behavioral issues, whether it's conscious or not within the family dynamic, generally we know something is off, and it changes everyone's behavior. It changes relationships, it changes value structures, it changes how we relate to one another on a fundamental level. So that's first and foremost. It changes relationships and how we see each other. Very often there's emotions that rise up, like if, from a parent or caregiver, if they're consciously aware that there's substance use, it's why do they keep doing this? So there's frustration, there's confusion, there's hyper vigilance or over focus on that loved one who's using, and that it tends to hijack the life of the family, especially the parents and caregivers, that they put a lot of resources, understandably, into solving problems and even managing the life of their loved one, or getting so frustrated and angry at them and maybe even feeling guilty about that
Charles, let me time you out real quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you now. My Bluetooth headphones crapped out, so I had to switch. And when I switched, I lost everything. So
okay.
pick up right where you were at, brother.
Okay. So you got me on that end?
Yeah, I've got you now.
Okay. No worries. Tech stuff happens. So essentially that. So the relationships, the emotional health and well-being, and then very often what happens is parents and caregivers give so much of their time and energy to their loved one, they leave themselves out of the equation, meaning they start to drop their own health and well-being in just fundamental ways. And so that can look like overeating, not getting enough exercises, not sleeping well, not managing one's own emotional life well, instead, feeling the feelings of another person. So it impacts the whole family system and the individual all the way around.
Yeah, that switch that happens where family members begin to ignore self in lieu of trying to aid. When does that become? Because I mean, you hear that and you're like, well, yeah, there's a moral part of me that says when someone's in need, others' needs first kind of mentality. None of us would say that that's an unhealthy thing. But at what point in a family dynamic does it become unhealthy to say, I'm going to put your stuff ahead of my stuff and begin to not even be mindful of my own health and wellness?
It's a slippery slope, and it can look different for different folks. But essentially, when the daily priorities that I have for my life, in all areas of life, when they start to drop away more and more and more. So I'm not doing the things I used to do for myself. And maybe I'm justifying it and I'm rationalizing it because I'm devoting more time and energy, necessarily, understandably, to my loved one, but it's not making a difference. It may in fact be driving the behavior, the substance use further in a loved one. And it's really tricky. It takes a lot of education, from my experience working with families, to understand those dynamics. But essentially on this end, it looks like emotional upset. It looks like, I'm not getting outside, and I used to get outside all the time, for example. It's hard to get my work done, so there's more psychological effects that start to take place. And you may be, from a therapeutic sense, I'm not a therapist, but there could be depression or anxiety, some other disorders that are starting to creep in over time.
Yeah, man, it makes me think how important it is for families who find themselves maybe even playing jump rope with that line to be working either with a recovery coach or with a therapist, some sort of professional or paraprofessional as a sounding board, because it is such a slippery slope and we don't ever really know like how much is too much, that like that's why these kind of jobs exist, is so that people can provide you help and resources.
That's right. And that's why we do what we do. And so many of our friends and other professionals listening in and watching in, or who've been guests on the show, same thing. It takes all of us. It's such a complex dynamic and family disease. So it's not just the individual. When I, reemphasize that, we both said it, I want to say it again here, that it's not just the individual, it's not just the child or the loved one who's struggling. It involves the whole family. And that's the part that it takes a while for the families that I serve to start to catch on, because they have a role to play. We all are playing a part in this disease, whether we know it or not. And that takes a little bit of time to understand. And that's the first part, that awareness and the education piece.
Yeah. It's so confusing too, because there's not one way to do it. Like what might be healthy for one family might be over the line and unhealthy for a different family. And so there's just a lot of nuance involved, I think, in all of those things.
I agree completely. I mean, there's some core things, like we're mentioning, some core dynamics that tend to be in place, but what it looks like, how it manifests in each family and family member, it's unique because we're complex creatures, so it looks a little bit different for each one of us.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, I think. Well, we've been doing this a long time, so I think we notice it probably faster than other people may notice it, just because it's like an auto mechanic that hears a noise that's off in a car. He's like, "Do you guys hear that?" And everybody's like, "No," but he's been doing it for 30 years. And so with the experience, I think sometimes it's easier maybe for us than it is for other people. But at some point, it becomes clear that like we're not well as a family. Like things are obviously not going well. Maybe we let it go too long before we started to address some problems. And so families just find themselves in an atmosphere, a family environment, and a family culture of unhealth. When we think about rest and renewal and some of the things that you gained over your recent, family vacation, what role do those things play in kind of helping families maintain some semblance or foundation of sanity?
Yeah, and those words can mean different things to different people. So I'll give my perspective and definitely talk a little bit about our trip while honoring our time. Yeah. So if you, and I know you would say this too, Derek, if anyone from our first question, if you're suffering, please reach out to Derek or me or Parents Helping Parents or your local resource. There is help and it does get better. It takes some work, but it does get better. So the role that, rest and renewal, that's the theme. And to me, those words briefly mean different things. So rest is essentially slowing down or stopping from a level of activity or a certain activity or group of activities. So slowing down or stopping activity. Renewal more is about a more intentional set of thoughts, activities, with a different aim in mind. And renewal meaning something like a different perspective, a different point of view, reconnection with who I am and what matters most, kind of thing. So more purposeful, intentional. Rest is taking a break. Renewal is like, I need a change. And so for me, just in terms of, using the story of our recent trip, and I'll try to be brief because it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of adventure. Yeah. So we borrowed an RV. My wife and I borrowed her parents' RV, 28-footer. I'd driven some larger vehicles, but nothing that big. And they were so generous in getting it all ready to hit the road for this 2,000-mile trip or however long it was, And we went out to the Grand Canyon with our two daughters and our oldest daughter's long-term boyfriend. And we had already decided on the front end, this was going to a trip to remember, and we were going to have a great time. So we had that intentionality on the front end. I would say that's an example of that renewal category. I was not looking to get away from it all, because I kind of, I can kind of stick in there longer with life now, but I definitely needed a break and a new perspective. And I knew the Grand Canyon would provide that, So we don't take a lot of trips like this. It's been a decade since we've had anything remotely this big. So, but there were also periods of rest along the way. Of course, there's a lot of driving, but then you arrive at your RV park. So our first stop was La Veta, Colorado. Gorgeous, in this valley, mountains all around. A small thunderstorm moved in that night. It was absolutely moving in ways I could not have predicted. So this renewal, this shift in perspective was already happening. We came to rest in this experience of being away from home, being connected with my family. Those intentions we had set early on, I was trying to honor those, and those were the results. I came to rest, and rest felt really good. It was very emotionally moving, and I was able to slow down and stop from that activity. So I'm going to pause there, but that was just one example of setting those intentions for renewal, having an adventure, really, but together, deciding that we were going to be together in this adventure, come what may, and then coming to rest on just that first night.
What is it about active addiction that keeps people so cycled that they miss rest?
Yeah. So I've been there on both ends now, not with my direct family, but with other family members and lots of friends, and of course, those I serve. And very often there's a story that goes along with addiction, and it's a different story for each family and each loved one, but it's something like, this needs to stop. When's this going to end? I can help. You need to just do what I say. When is this going to end? What can I do? How can I fix it? And those are very common thoughts that come in, and that becomes so compelling because there's a lot of fear and hope driving the dynamic. We tend to want to be hopeful that our loved one can get it, that they can find a lasting sobriety and a recovery that keeps them, that restores them to the kind of person we know them to be, or that we remember them being. So just getting caught up in the storyline of wanting to help, wanting to fix, wanting to save. And really, this is key, not understanding the dynamics and really the power and the complexity that substance use disorder brings to the family system. So it's back to that educational piece. Once we understand, the hope there is that you can detach some. There's only so much we can do with a loved one. I always tell parents, keep loving your loved one. If you're really angry at them, if you're really pissed at them, that's okay too, whatever feelings are there. But, if you're committed to loving them as long as you can, love them. But sometimes you need to let go of parts of the relationship. It's impossible to intervene 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and keep them from using, for example. So that keeps people chasing that dynamic and always trying to resolve the tension of addiction. It's impossible.
Yeah. You said something just a second ago, Charles, and in my head, I had, I think, a reaction that maybe some family members have during these conversations about, desperately, kind of waiting for their loved one to find recovery and to find change and hoping they can do it. And then my cynicism was like, can they find that? Can they do that? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of family members get to that point where they're like, I don't know if they can. What do you tell those families that are like butting up against that idea that, man, maybe this is not actually ever going to change?
Right. So coming to terms with that reality, once that is a belief that enters the family member's mind, then to communicate about that, to talk it out. And it depends on where they're at and how they want to relate to their loved one, honestly. So it's more open. But generally, if they've crossed that line and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to get it or not. Well, okay, from a coaching perspective, then it would be, well, what do you want to do with your life? How do you want to relate to your loved one if that's true, right? And holding space for that to resolve over time, and so that they can gain a new perspective that can be most helpful for them, right? Because sometimes, honestly, our loved ones aren't going to get it. And I always hold a place of hope because I'm living proof it can happen. And I had some low bottoms in my addiction journey. So it can happen, but it doesn't mean that it will. So holding out hope, but also being realistic. And so that may mean living your best life, finding out what it means to reconnect with what you wanted to do with your life. Maybe your loved one will get it, maybe they won't, but we're going to take a trip out to Florida, or, I'm going to start dating my spouse again. Those things that I kind of left on the back burner or that just fell away because we put so much time and energy into our loved one. That's just one example of how that could work.
Yeah, it's good. What are, one of the questions was to really define rest and renewal, but we've kind of been doing that. You are kind of articulated that already, that rest is a break from the routine, a break from spending energy, that renewal is a more intentional time that you're hoping to get a shift in perspective. What are some practical ways that families can engage in both of those, rest and renewal, when there's a son or a daughter or a family member that's continuing to use?
It's difficult, right? So one of the things that I always encourage family members to consider and really to do, because it's good for you, it's in the name of health and well-being and sanity, is to practice self-care. And I know you and I have talked a lot about that and how we communicate with loved ones, family members about self-care. And essentially what I mean by that is paying attention to what your life needs and responding appropriately. So it's sort of the layman's definition of self-care, just really noticing, so that's first and foremost, really just re-engaging or engaging with your life on a more fundamental level. That's first. And so there's a lot of things that can come from that in different areas of life. So I think this talk's going out the 4th of July. So if you don't already have plans, or if you're engaged in your plans and you're listening to this, having a lot of fun, celebrating freedom on the 4th of July, for example, and what that means to you with family, friends, and loved ones. And making the most of that experience and really committing yourself to that experience, knowing, yes, I have a loved one that's struggling with substance use disorder. They may or may not be at your event. So one sort of derivation of that party idea, celebration idea, if they are still in your life and they're coming to family events like this, maybe having a sober, friendly party. So you might normally have alcohol at a party like this, but maybe for this one you don't. Or maybe you don't drink just for this event, and just to provide a little bit lower barrier for your loved one. So just some options there, but really committing to self-care, finding joy is really what I'm after with that second one, joy and a sense of freedom, not just on the 4th, but living your best life doesn't mean not caring about your loved one. You can still care and do the things you need to do to live a full and satisfying life.
Yeah, I love that, because I think so many families need to hear that it's okay to feel like your family's struggling, and also be able to engage in some things that provide us with some joy and some fun. Like it's not mutually exclusive. Like you can have good times in the midst of bad times kind of mentality. And so many of the families that I work with for so long, some for years, some for decades, have just lived in like this gray fog where somebody's addiction or somebody's emotional illness has just created this sense that nothing's ever going to be okay, no matter what. We're just going to kind of have this mundane experience, and they forget that, hey, it's still okay for us to celebrate things that need to be celebrated, and it's still okay for us to laugh at things that are funny that are happening around us. And sometimes we need that more than anything, is just to take a step back and say, hey, like, yeah, it's been a rough month, but by God, we're going to have some fun today. Let's go do something.
Absolutely. man. And back to the ping pong example, right? Here at Stages of Recovery, where my office, Full Integration Coaching, that's my business, is based. You and I see each other up here, and Dustin Huckabee and Hanley Smith. We get on the ping pong table and just, for me, act like a little kid. You know what I mean? And we're competitive, but we kind of leave it at the table, meaning this is just, the work that we do is pretty serious. You know what I mean? And this is just a way to let loose and we're not out there trying to fix the world. You know, we definitely want to help and make a difference. But there comes a time when you need to step away and do something different to get a little bit of rest and renewal. And a game of ping pong, chasing that little bouncing ball all the way around that room for an hour, is a good way to reset and get a little shift in perspective. And you know, life isn't that serious for a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, Charles, just so that people know, maybe talk just for a minute about Full Integration Coaching and what you do and how you might be able to be a service to people in the community.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. Thanks. So I am two things. I'm a certified life coach, and my specialty is purpose. So either life purpose or just adding more purpose and meaning into life. It's my specialty in one area. And then I'm also a certified professional recovery coach. So that's for addiction recovery of all kinds. So since we're mostly talking about addiction, substance use disorder, and recovery here, I'll go through that lens. I work with individuals, groups, and families, starting to work with some families, certainly loved ones on the other side of substance use disorder, who are trying to navigate their way ahead and figure out what's most important to them in a non-clinical way. So I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor. I'm a professional support role with coach training. I'm aligned with the International Coaching Federation, Ethics and Competencies, if people know what that is. And so what that looks like in terms of working with loved ones is finding out, similar to the conversations we've had. So on the topic today, hey, how do I add more joy into my life? I'm intrigued. And so I could work one-on-one to find out what that means to an individual, what it might look like moving ahead. And then it happens through dialogue and all the worksheets and videos that people want to have in meaningful ways. So that means what's relevant for the individual. So it can look very different for different people. So, hey, we want to take an RV trip to the Grand Canyon. Okay, how are we going to make it happen? So that's something that's coachable. So I do work with family members. And then, of course, I worked with loved ones, with those that are in recovery from addiction. So that's after clinical care, meaning they've been to treatment, intensive outpatient, they've been to addiction counseling, they've addressed trauma, and they're ready to ask the question, what's next? So I really work with people with they're looking for long-term recovery, or they want to enhance their existing recovery in meaningful ways that make sense for them. And so that, again, it's very focused on the client, the individual, on how they want to move forward with the recovery, you know? And so in this way, like, how do I bring more joy into my life without using alcohol? What in the world does that look like? I had to ask myself that in the first couple of years of sobriety. And that looks different for different people. And then I'm also contracting with different organizations. In the midst right now. I can't say the name of the organization because it's not finalized, but with contracting with the Sober Living House to coach all of their residents. Yeah. So that's out there. And so I'd be glad to have those conversations too. You know, I'll pause. That's essentially what I'm up to.
Yeah, that's great, man. Hey, Charles, I always ask all the guests that come on, if somebody comes across this video online, on YouTube, on Facebook, and either the person watching it is in the midst of struggling with the substance use disorder, or one of their family members is struggling, what would be like your 30, 45, 60-second message of hope for somebody that's really in the shit right now?
There's always a reason to hope. And I'm not talking about the kind of magical rainbows, lollipops kind of hope. I'm talking more about the science of hope, meaning Dr. Chan Hellman's research and others, meaning that there is a future ahead that can be better than it is today, and that you can play an active part in making that a reality. It doesn't mean that your loved one will or won't get sober or find lasting recovery, but it means there is a brighter future ahead. And I truly believe that. Once you really get deep down into what matters most to you, your values, how you see the world, and the life that you want to live in connection with those that you care about. So I would say that is key, that there's always a reason to hope, and there's always a purpose for each and every day, not just a life purpose, but there's meaning and purpose to each and every day. It may be hard to find, but there's a reason for today. And that struggle makes it worthwhile, and it sustains hope as well. So those two things work together hand in hand.
Yeah, excellent, man. Hey, Charles, it's the beginning of a holiday weekend, man. You got a lot going on. Thanks for your time this morning. I appreciate it. Always, you're a really valuable and meaningful person to me, and I know to so many people in our community, man. So just thanks for everything you do, and thanks for being you.
Absolutely, Derek. Thanks for the opportunity, and hope you have a great 4th of July.
Yeah, you too, man. Hey, everybody that's watching, have a wonderful, safe 4th of July weekend. I hope that you come out or you wake up on Tuesday with all your fingers that you had when you went to sleep tonight. Be safe. That's all I'm saying. Be safe out there with your fireworks. Be smart, but have a good time and enjoy yourself, and maybe take advantage of a holiday weekend to actually find some rest. Maybe think of ways that you could be intentional and looking for some renewal and some shift in perspective. So thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to share the video on your Facebook feed. Charles, as always, it's been a pleasure, man. We'll catch up next week. Okay.
Sounds good.